Orna, thank you so much for joining us and being on our show.
Pleasure, and shalom to all of you.
Thank you. And I would love to hear more about your background and maybe some of your experiences and your service to the Jewish people in the army. Maybe you can share with us any area that you want to discuss.
Okay, so maybe we'll start with the beginning. You asked about my accent. So my parents came to Israel in 48 from
Wow.
South Africa as young people, as a married couple. We lived in a small village on the beach shore. And as everybody else, went to school, went to the army. I was an instructor in the army, left the army, went to university as everybody else. And I hated it. I suffered. I wasn't a good pupil. And, you need a lot of patience for that. So I met my brother who already worked for the Israeli, the security forces. I didn't know where and what. But I told him, listen, you have to rescue me. I have to leave the university. I don't know what to do. So he said to me, you know what? They're looking for a woman. I'm not sure you'll get in. You'll have to pass a lot of, tests and all sorts of things. And if you'll succeed, then great, you'll leave the university. So that's how I started. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know
Wow.
what I was going to do. I was only 21, which is very young, too young in my mind. And I went through all these tests and things, and they said, okay, on Thursday they told me, on Sunday you begin. So Friday morning I took the car, went to Jerusalem to the university, collected all my stuff, went back, said goodbye to Jerusalem for a while. Sunday, 8 o'clock, came to the place where they told me to be at, and went into a room full of guys sitting around the table with their names on, and me, the only woman. And a lot of people around us sat there. A guy comes up and said, welcome to the Mossad. And I almost fell off my chair because I had no idea where I was going. And I looked at everybody else, there were young guys, officers in the army, and all that jazz. And me, the young girl from the village. And I said to myself, what can I help them with? I mean, me, the only story I knew about the Mossad was Eichmann and the catching of Eichmann at those days. I read the book. And that's how I started, actually.
Wow. That's
So
great.
that was my first day.
And so share with us maybe some memorable moment, something that you did. I don't know if it's classified, if you can share. Is there anything that you can take us through, something that you can share with us that we can sort of live in your life for a few moments?
Okay. Firstly, secrets I will not share. I don't share with anybody. And I talk a lot about it today, these days. But we were a group working together as a group. Me as the only woman and a few guys around me, heaven. But what we did, we got all sorts of the technology around things. I mean, not physically talking to people, but getting information technically, which means following people, photography, getting into places where you're not supposed to be at, and things like that. One of the first memories and things that we did do, and I can share, is bombing the Iraqi nuclear power. Back then, at the 80s, beginning of the 80s, that was one of the first things that ever, people spoke about. And we were part of that. Getting the information, not bombing, but getting the information, where it was, what were they doing, who was involved with it, things like that. The stuff that we did, of course, we cannot talk about, but the life that we had, I mean, it's not like the movies. I mean, when I watch movies today, which I enjoy a lot, about, police and about spying, it's a bit far-fetched. It's not exactly how it is. It's much more gray. A lot of hours that you spend watching and looking, being out of the house for many weeks and me being 21, and my family wasn't in Israel at the time, actually. So coming back to an empty house, empty flat on a Friday, Saturday night, going away again for 3, 4 weeks, coming back again. Very lonely life. It's not easy at all. Also, the fact that you need to be quiet about it. Nobody knew who I was, where I worked. I mean, even my friends didn't know what I was doing. So you have to have like a double life.
Yeah. So what drove you? You know, you're like you're speaking about this. There's two things that come into my head. One is the danger. And again, I don't know what's, like you said, real and what's sort of drama in terms of the danger, but I'm sure you were put into compromising positions. I'm sure that you were in countries that, if you were exposed, would have been, you know, horrific consequences. You don't even get the usual things people get, which is the recognition from your closest people. You know, so I guess I'm asking you a double question. The first question I'm asking is, how do you get through these difficult times? You're sitting somewhere and you've got to grapple with the tension of the moment, maybe the consequences of what happens. And then the second question is, what drives you to keep on doing it?
Okay. So I'll tell you a story. I think stories are better than, you know, everything else. The first time that I went overseas doing a job, I was still in training. We hardly had any women at that time. I'm talking to you about 1980s. And now you can know how the age. You saw my granddaughter. Um,
Bless.
it was the first time. And actually, when we worked, we didn't go on our names. We had passports, we had different names. Sometimes we were Israeli, sometimes we weren't. And that was the first time I flew. And I flew to Cyprus. And we landed in Cyprus, an hour and a half away from Israel, short, going to the airport, stand in the queue, and suddenly I realized I don't remember my name. First time. And you know, the first time, so you feel the butterflies and you get a bit panicky. And and then it passes, and I remembered my name, and I went through, and everything was okay. But that's the tension that you learn to live with. I mean, that was a small story. Sometimes you have to run away. Sometimes you're somewhere inside an office where you're not supposed to be, and somebody's knocking at the door, or there's a noise coming from somewhere and you realize that you have a problem. You have to learn to live with the panic, with the worry, with the being scared. Many people tell me when I ask them, what do you think you need to be in order to become a spy? And a lot of people say you mustn't be afraid. So I say to them, wrong answer, because you have to be afraid, because that's one of your tools. And when you get afraid, you have to start asking yourself, why am I afraid? Am I afraid because of me? Or am I afraid because the surroundings? Have I got a right to be afraid? And you learn to live with the questions, and you learn to live with the tension. And that's part of your life. You become, that's who you are. So being afraid and living with the tension is something that you live with. I'm sure that after, 26, I worked there for 26 years, the body talks back at you for living with that tension. But you learn to live with it.
Wow.
I can tell you that when things happen to me, not to do with work, I like the tension. I live by it. And when there's tension, I work better. I
Mm-hmm.
think better. So not everybody can do that, I know, because I used to recruit people and I used to teach people as well. And one of the things that we do check, and you have to go through that, is to be afraid, but to work with it,
Mm-hmm.
not to stop. A lot of people are afraid and they can't live with it.
Well, since you are an instructor, can you share this? What does it take to be a great spy? What are some of the qualities that you look for when you're training people?
Okay, firstly, it depends. which direction they're going, because there are a lot of jobs, different jobs. So you need different qualities for every job. But if we, summarize it all, I can say one of them is, working with being afraid, being brave. You have to work by a plan and stick to it, but also know how to work around the plan. Because every time that we go and we work, we get a list of things that we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And everything is like there's a map, like a logbook. But there's always something missing, and there's always a new thing that happens. And you always have to know when you need to stop and when you can continue and how. You have to be flexible with that. So that's another thing that you need. You have to be like an actor. I always talk about acting because we have all sorts of different names, and every name has a story behind it. And a reason why we chose that certain personality for that specific trip. So you're an actor, you act. But unlike actors who, some of them, maybe most of them, they act for the clapping. They need the recognition of the people. We don't have that. Many times, on television or things, you hear about things, and back then, I used to say to myself around the people I was sitting with, oh, that's me, I was there. And you shut up. Nobody knows. So you have to be an actor. That's another quality that you need. You have to have the language, mostly not Hebrew. Usually you're not Israeli.
Right.
You have to be very thorough with your history and your background because you have to live it. I mean, it's not like a stage where you go for 2 hours and you get off, because you're there for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, for 4 weeks. It depends on the job.
And when you go to these places, you're collecting information. So you have to blend in. So you have to be from there. You can't, you speak, like earlier, we had the opportunity to speak to another individual named Avner. And he was saying to me that it's interesting because, the Mossad's an interesting organization. I've been watching, I know very little. I've only been watching it as with big eyes since I was a little kid, waiting for, someone to tap me on the shoulder. But what's interesting is that what's unique about the Mossad, from what I understand, is that it uses everything that it has properly. We're a Jewish state, which means we have things and don't have things. Like Jews have talents, don't have talents. Like, we may not be like, the strongest people in the world, but we have specific talents. And what he said earlier, which I thought was fascinating, was one of the things that make us very unique is that we come from a lot of places, which means we have a lot of natural, normal languages.
Right.
That is a tool that may be even more powerful than jumping out of an airplane and hitting a target the way you'd see it in the movies.
Right. Yeah, Israel is unique because we do have all these people, not only the languages, the mentality.
Right.
So
yeah,
you can, if you know the mentality, you can blend in naturally.
yeah,
And it's not only that, you have to know how to work around it. I mean, it's colors and it's the way you look. And a woman, take a woman. A woman usually walks in the street and she wants everybody to think that she's beautiful. Guys too these days, but never mind. We did the opposite. I mean, I lived in France when I was already with a family, with kids. My kids and my family, we used to live in Paris, and I used to leave from there. So I was around 40 already.
wow,
And I used to walk around and nobody ever spoke to me because we know how to do that with the colors that you wear. You're like a great person that nobody talks to if you don't want to be talked to. When you spend weeks, and unless you want to have the conversation, you don't have conversation. Because a person can do that. I mean, nobody will talk to you unless you invite them to talk to you. Doesn't matter how, with your eyes, with your behavior, whatever. So it's a life of a lot of loneliness,
Yeah.
especially when you're alone and not with the group, because I wasn't always with the group. At the beginning, I was.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the times I was by myself, weeks on end. And it's very, very hard. And I can tell you as a mother, I used to come home and it used to be very hard because I used to come home after a week or 2 weeks and I wanted peace and quiet. I needed time to reshuffle my cards, to get acquainted to my family again. And by the time, time passed, they realized, they didn't jump at me when I came home, they gave me the time. And then when I left, and that's a terrible thing to say as a mother, sometimes I felt relief. I'm back to my quietness. You become a loner.
Mm-hmm.
And as a family, it's very, very hard,
Sure.
especially as a mother.
Yeah.
And these are some of the things that you need to live with. I mean, apart from being, knowing how to look at things, knowing how to follow people and not being seen, all sorts of technical things that you can learn better, or, you can be very good at it and less. It depends on you. But it's much more than that. And a lot of people are unable to do that, not because they're not clever enough. A lot of people are much cleverer than I am. And a lot of people are, technically they know better and they can see the whole picture much better than you. But you need those certain qualities put together.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be like, I used to tell my pupils, you need to be like a cat in the street. You need to live in the street and survive there.
Mm-hmm.
and
Fascinating.
and find yourself. You mustn't be seen. And when you go overseas, especially for instance in Europe, take Switzerland for instance. When you walk in the street as a spy, you don't only look forward. You have to look forward, you have to look at the sides, you have to look at the back, and you have to look on top. Why? Firstly, you want to know if you're being followed, so you need to check your back. And you don't just turn around and check your back. You need to see the sides because people are looking at you from the sides as well. And you need to look in front of you to know where you're going. But you also need to look at the top of you because a lot of people, on the balconies, looking at you. And Switzerland, for instance, is like a police state. If a guy on the third floor on the balcony sees you crossing on a red light, by foot, he'll call the police.
Hmm.
And we've had people being caught because citizens called the police. So you always have to have, like the 360 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
and on top and on the bottom for the dog and all that. But it's that's how it is. You always have to be focused
Mm-hmm.
all the time, and it's tiring. A lot of the times you work at night,
Mm-hmm.
where everybody's asleep, and you go into places like a thief. You're not by yourself when you do that. Usually we know how to do things, but you have to be awake during the day as well. Why? Because for instance, you're a tourist somewhere. It's not logical that you'll sleep all day and be awake all night.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be awake during the day and awake at night as well.
Wow.
Which people don't think about these things, it seems like
Yeah.
that's how it goes, but it doesn't. So you get very tired, and what else? I mean,
Wow. So powerful. And I know I want to be respectful of your time. I know we don't have that much time left. Was there anything just to share? I know that you're collecting and doing and following and you're providing, I guess, the information that we only read about maybe even years later, the Iraqi bomb, the 1981, or I'm sure what we're seeing right now, even today in Gaza, is the product of the work of the Mossad. months and years, maybe even beforehand, that will so a lot of what the world sees could be years after you're on the streets. Was there anything in particular you can remember where you may not have realized it, or you were able to see the end of an operation and how your work, even though it was in one area, allowed Israel to do something that you can share?
I'll share with you something that I wasn't involved with. Iran. Bringing all that stuff from Iran that Bibi Netanyahu, showed the world. That's why I can talk about it. A most heroic operation, I must say. I can say that these are the things that we do. It doesn't always have to be in Iran. It can be everywhere, because there's a lot of information, not only back there, but they buy things and they do things all over the world. So you can do it, don't have to go into Iran. But what happened there, the way that they did things, was an amazing, amazing operation, which I think the world was stunned. And I don't know why. I mean, we're such a small country with so many problems, which you can hear about now. The whole world has suffered the last, 2020. But since then, what's been going on in Israel now, you think to yourself, how can we do all this? Such a small little country, and how we have to suffer. And I really don't know. Maybe it's because we know we haven't got another place to go to. Maybe because we believe. When I used to work, the first time, when people go and get a job, the first thing they ask is, how much will I earn? We never ask that question, ever. I remember as a recruiter, if somebody asked me, how much will we earn? The first few questions, he was out.
Wow. Mission.
That's how it went back then, because we worked for Israel. We believed in Zionism. We believed in the cause so much. It wasn't just, a job. It was our lives.
Yeah.
And we really believed in it.
Wow. So powerful.
And that's why we did all that. We gave up so many things. As a young girl, as a woman till I found my husband, as a mother. I can tell you that when we lived in Paris, my young daughter, she was 10, 11. When we came back, she said, I have no mother.
Wow.
When the psychologist asked her, what do you mean? She said, I gave up on her. She was never there. I found my solutions. And it took me years to recover her trust and her love. We're okay today, I'm happy to say.
Baruch Hashem.
But
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
And not only is it a lot, but and this is why this is so important, is that it's sacrifice that nobody can see.
No.
It's not going to make a movie about the love of a mother to a child and saying goodbye to do something that she can't even share with her best friends. Like we're talking about, we always speak about the idea that we need to have mesirat nefesh for each other. And that when we're together and we're biyachad, we can bring miracles. And we talk about it. But when we get to meet people that are actually living their lives, doing it at a level that no one can even see, we can see the movies. We can see what it's like to put Eichmann in the back of the car. And that's also very hard. And it's also very hard but what we can't see is the invisible woman in France that is shedding a tear because she's leaving her daughters. And she's doing it without asking when I'm getting mine, because she's doing it for the better of the world and of the Jewish people. Right. And the reason why it's so important is because, and this is why we're doing it on this show, is because it sends a message to the rest of us. Be bigger. Be bigger. Israel is now in the middle of a crisis. Step up for the Jewish people. The neighbor needs you. Step up for the neighbor, right? Like when we get to meet people like you, it reminds all of us that there's more in us than we thought. And whatever we're sacrificing, you can always go a little bit further. And that's the story of the Jewish people. It's been the story of the Jewish people from the beginning. Hashem
Okay.
drives us to things that are lo yuman, but when you come out of it, we go, how did we do this? It's
And
because,
people really do. When we started talking, you said, you hear all these stories. And when I lecture, and I lecture a lot about the people behind the work and the women behind, because a lot of people think that the women are doing different things, more sexual things, but the women are doing exactly what the men are doing. And I talk about the people, and I talk about, the sacrifice and how, and we didn't do it because we felt that we are sacrificing. We really did it from the bottom of our hearts, of our beliefs.
yeah,
It wasn't a game. And now when you see the politics and you see the pettiness and you see the power games and you see all that around you, you say, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Somewhere we lost our way.
yeah,
And we really need to, focus back in and change our ways, because Israel is not a regular country.
right.
And we're here for a reason.
Yeah.
I don't know where your parents came from, but I know where my parents came from Lithuania, and all their family was killed.
Yeah. Yeah. My grandparents are Holocaust survivors, and I come from the world of the Syrian Jews that ran out of Syria and the Holocaust surviving Jews that ran out of Europe. That's my background. And when I grew up in a world where we were looking at Israel from birth. From
Right.
birth. We
I'm not that old, but almost. I was born in 56.
Yeah, 19. Yeah.
So, and I've seen all the wars and everything go, by me.
Yeah.
And I said to my husband the other day, we've been suffering, this country, the people, we've been suffering so much. I don't know of any country that had this for such a long time, the suffering and this unknowing, like the people around Gaza, the way that they live,
Unbelievable.
day by day, is unbelievable, and the world doesn't see it.
Yeah. Well, they won't see it. They'll never see it.
Why?
I'm a diaspora Jew. I live here.
Yeah, I know, but
I can tell
America is still not there. I'll tell you.
They're
When
never
I
going to
lived
see
in
it.
Paris in the 90s, I saw how Europe was conquered by Palestinians.
Yeah.
And Europe doesn't know it yet, maybe. I think they're realizing it now.
Yeah.
They've been conquered.
Yeah. Well, we're starting here now.
That's what's going on.
We're starting now. It's a hatchala. We're starting.
Right.
It's beginning now with Congress. Starting. This is the beginning of the end. Orna, thank you so much for joining us. And really, your sacrifice for our people is inspiring. And we thank you for what you do, and keep on shining your light on this world.
Thank you very much. And let's hope for a better world.
Amen.
Amen.
Thanks so much for watching. For more content, like and subscribe, and be sure to tune in live every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern at theshabbatshow.com or right here on YouTube.